Welcome to Disambiguation. I'm your host, Michael Fauscette. Each week, we interview experts in artificial intelligence, generative AI, and business automation to help business leaders understand how to use these tools for the biggest business impact. Our show today, The Identity Threat, Why AI Adoption is a Human Challenge, Not a Technology Problem. I'm joined by Eva Minkoff, founder of Bold Being. Eva, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me on.
To get us started, why don't you give us a little bit of your background? I know, you focus around human transformation and not technologists and Bold Being to help leaders navigate AI. You host Human Care podcasts. You've done TEDx talks on fixing healthcare. So how does that journey across healthcare, coaching, chronic patient advocacy lead you to focus on helping organizations navigate AI adoption?
Thank you for bringing that up because it is quite a journey. As you mentioned, I've spent all of my career really up until now working exclusively in healthcare. 2 decades of, it's all over the place, like clinical and bench research, bedside care, media, marketing, and startups, both as a co-founder and early employee of multiple companies. And I gave a TED Talk called 5 Minutes to Fix Our Broken Healthcare System. I'm aware it's a very bold title.
Yeah, I was going to say 5 minutes. That's impressive, but
yeah, if you watch it, you'll understand why it's called that. It was specifically about the patient-doctor relationship and why fixing that relationship is the foundation for fixing everything else. But the core argument was that when people operate under relentless pressure, they lose the ability to trust themselves in the room. For doctors, that breaks the relationship with the patient. And for now executives that I work with, that refers to breaking everything downstream from that. The through line is the pressure collapse of self-trust. And that's what eventually pulled me into coaching specifically. I kept watching brilliant healthcare leaders. When they were in high stakes moments, they lost access to the very judgment that made them exceptional, like how they got in their positions in the first place. And now that's exacerbated by AI. And here's what makes this conversation timely for me on a personal level. So I shared with you, Michael, that my daughter was born on November 30th, 2022. For those of you who don't know, that is the day ChatGPT launched publicly. Many consider that the first day of the AI era. And obviously, that's the day my life changed completely as a new mother. And it was the same day the world changed completely, in many's opinion. So I've been living in both disruptions, if you will, simultaneously. Though it's been lovely on the daughter side for sure. And I think that's made me a sharper observer of what this era is actually doing to people.
Yeah, I have 2 daughters. I would say that did change my perspective of change management as well. So that's good. When we were prepping for this, you made an interesting distinction in our conversation. You talked about, we're experiencing right now, we didn't really change management as we sort of classically have thought about it. You called it more of an identity threat. I mean, it's an interesting statement, but could you unpack that a little bit for us? I mean, what does that actually mean? When AI threatens how people see themselves and their role, why is that different from just normal technology disruption?
I'm really glad you brought that up because I still hear the words change management coming up a lot. But when we talk about change management, we usually mean here's a new tool, here's a new process, here's training, and here's a timeline. Then often people will resist it. We manage the resistance, and eventually adoption happens. Like I think this is a known playbook, and this is not that. What AI is doing is closer to what the Industrial Revolution did, except that it's happening exponentially in real time rather than over decades. And it's reaching people who have never been threatened by automation before. So we're talking I mean, in my world, surgeons, executives, but lawyers, researchers, people in creative, now even coders. Well, that was quite a throw off. People whose identity and authority and sense of legitimacy is built on a specific kind of expertise. And when AI starts doing versions of that work, the threat is not to the job description. It's to answer the question, who am I? And do I matter? And that is an identity threat. That's not just something changing that you have to adapt to in the way that we're used to. You can't.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. It's much more personal, right? Yeah, that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah, you can't manage an identity threat with a training program.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I just read a report recently, earlier this week, I think, actually, that talked about how they're finding that employees are actually sabotaging AI initiatives. And this was particularly strong in the Gen Z workers. It seems sort of, and you mentioned Industrial Revolution, I immediately think of the Luddites, and sort of seems like the Luddite movement of our era, right? I mean, what do you think is driving that resistance? And, how should leaders think about it? How, rather than just dismissing it as fear of change, what should they think about, and what do they do about it?
Well, first, I want to normalize this before explaining it. When you see those numbers, like 30, 40, 50% of employees intentionally undermining AI initiatives, and actually a lot of the time it's like 70%, the instinct is to frame that as resistance or insubordination. And it's neither. It's survival behavior.
Yeah.
Like caveman level survival behavior. Yeah. When people think or feel their relevance, their legitimacy, and their sense of professional identity is under threat, they're not going to respond rationally. Yeah. They respond protectively, and that is not a choice. This is human wiring. Fight, flight, freeze. We're all familiar with that. Yeah. And as you and I spoke about, the Luddites were not irrational people. They were skilled workers whose entire livelihood felt like it was being erased. Yeah. And we're seeing the same dynamic right now, just across a much wider range of professionals and much faster. Yeah. The mistake leaders make, I believe, is treating this as a communication problem too. Like, we need to just explain the benefits better. No, like you cannot explain someone out of an identity threat. You have to address what it is underneath the behavior, which is fear about relevance and legitimacy.
Yeah. I mean, it is an emotional response, right? And that's certainly not something that you just explain away, because it's much deeper in each of the individuals than just, I don't really want to change. Like that's fine. Eventually, either you have to or you have to leave. But this is a completely different sort of situation.
Yeah, you can teach someone to use a tool and they still won't use it if they feel threatened by what the tool represents. Yeah, skills. Yeah, it's like skills training assumes that the barrier is knowledge. And for some people, some of the time it is, like, absolutely. But the deeper barrier is, the one that's actually stalling adoption at scale is going to be psychological and emotional. And it's the leader who stops trusting their own judgment because AI keeps second guessing it. That can be an even bigger threat because they're the ones leading the team. And then that team might perform compliance without genuine adoption because they're running on self-protection also. So
I mean, that is a very different sort of mental state. And you said something when we were doing the prep call that I thought was really interesting. You said it's not ethical unpreparedness. It's human unpreparedness, psychological and emotional unpreparedness. And that most of us, from an enterprise AI perspective, at least, focus on skills gap, training. But why is that why are we missing the real problem? I mean, what does psychological and emotional readiness actually have? What does that actually look like in this environment?
Hmm. Well, first, what it does not look like is decision latency. That's one. Like leaders who were decisive 6 months ago are now deferring things that they would have called immediately.
Mm.
Like they're in second guessing loops. And there's this autopilot kicking in, which is their operating system running on protection mode. And there's also performative adoption. So like the tool is technically in use, but the behavior around it hasn't changed. People are using AI to produce the outputs and then they quietly redo it themselves. And I call that compliance theater.
Yeah.
It's, the tool is being used to satisfy a mandate and not actually to change how the work gets done. Mm-hmm. And then I'd also say that the easiest one to miss is leadership brittleness. Senior leaders who are like really good at ambiguity usually, and they start getting rigid or over communicating or even withdrawing. And that usually means that they've lost access to their own steadiness and are white knuckling the situation rather than leading through it.
I mean, that must fundamentally be feel like a threat from a middle manager or an executive, because a big part of their identity is tied around the fact that they make decisions, right? And if you start to introduce technology that takes away some of those decisions, and because of its autonomy, I mean that does seem threatening, I guess.
Yeah, it's I think it's helpful to really know what has to land first in order for them to overcome this identity threat to both them and those whom they lead. The first being that this is not a knowledge problem, as we've said. It's not going to be like a training problem. Usually people understand actually what you're putting in front of them. What they don't trust is that what they don't know what the tool is going to mean for them. I think it's also important that they understand that resistance is information. Like we don't like resistance technically, but if you see it through a curiosity lens, there's so much there to unpack. So instead of every act looking like pushback, like every quiet workaround and even, passive aggressive non-adoption, it's your culture telling you something.
Yeah.
And if you suppress it, it goes underground. But if you read it, if you're present to it, you start to get a roadmap for then what is possible. And really, this is something that has to be said. Speed is not the right metric. If you think you are winning at AI adoption right now because you're adopting the fastest, that's not building sustainable adaptability. You're just chasing the next capability. And those are very different goals and they produce very different cultures.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is certainly, you can see, and I've run across this, just talking to clients about, their strategy, their process, where they're going, that there is a problem that says, it's not adoption. It's actually sort of the opposite. And you mentioned passive aggressive. It's like if you use these tools in a sloppy way, I get sloppy outputs. I get sloppy, ways to demonstrate that this is a bad idea. And maybe subconsciously that is a defense mechanism. I hadn't really thought of it in that context, but.
Yeah. At the end of the day, something that I put forward in literally every aspect of my work is that we have to remember humans are humans. And while there may be nuances to how we react, they all come from the same place.
So, you mentioned that we were talking about superpowers. So you mentioned your superpower was simplifying and, taking all the complexity and getting it down to the baseline to make things really understandable. I mean, in the AI space right now, there's a lot of noise and confusion. What are two or three things that you think leaders need to understand, as a foundation, really, before they can move forward with their initiatives?
Hmm. Well, I have a framework for this that really demonstrates phases of where most people are starting, where most organizations are starting, to what is possible. And I want to again note that everything that I've shared and will share applies to really any industry, despite my focus being on healthcare. I'll share later, maybe that healthcare, just how much more it comes to the surface in healthcare because the type of environment it is. But again, I hope that this proves to be valuable regardless of industry.
Yeah.
So right now, the first stage is instability. AI creates identity level instability for leaders, not just operational disruption. So their relevance feels threatened, their authority feels undermined, and their sense of decisiveness starts to erode, as I've said. And that is the trigger for what we see happening. And most organizations skip exploring this stage entirely and go straight into the adoption mandates. And that's why the mandates fail. The stage 2 is exploring the autopilot, as I call it, that shows up in these situations. So under sustained instability, leaders default to survival mode. They keep executing, but they lose access to really the judgment that they know themselves to have. They wouldn't be in those positions if they didn't have a good sense of judgment. And so their decisions get really reactive. They'll defer when they should be deciding themselves. Like I said before, they'll go rigid when they should be adaptive. And then pilot programs stall. So sometimes people rush into them, but a lot of the time they also stall. And not because the tech itself has failed, but because the person steering it is running on a compressed version of themselves. And then the third stage is really what is possible from that place, which I see as the opposite of autopilot, and I call it durable agency. And this is really the work. It means interrupting the autopilot pattern and rebuilding the leader's capacity to make decisions from actual conviction rather than fear. So this isn't all about catching up, and it's not about just performance confidence. It's actual self-trust under these real conditions. I'd say the leaders that get to stage 3 are the ones who move from a pilot to production actually successfully, which is super rare right now. And not because they've learned more, as I've said, not training, or they feel like they're up to date on everything with AI, but because they are actually more themselves. And that ties right back to what we're saying with this identity threat. How do you combat an identity threat? You understand your identity better.
Interesting. I mean, you used the term, we were talking before, sustainable adaptability, and saying that that's what's required, not just catching up. But that seems like a very powerful concept. How do you help leaders and their teams build sustainable adaptability, that capacity to be sustainable, authentic, adaptable, rather than just chasing every sort of new shiny object?
Well, to take it from a high level first, the first thing is reframing what the goal actually is that they have. If a leader thinks a goal is to stay current, they're always going to be behind. There's always going to be a new model and a new capability and a new thing the board is asking about. And I think of this like a treadmill, you're not going anywhere, you're just running on it. Sustainable adaptability is not about any of that, not about staying current. It's about building the internal capacity to navigate constant change without losing yourself in it. So meaning that you're not a chameleon. It's not adaptability where like you just have to put on a different outfit so that you can survive and be known as this great leader. It means that you understand what's authentic about yourself, what's valuable about yourself, and you would use that to adapt to whatever comes your way. And that's why also the word durable is one that I use. It doesn't mean that, I want to make it clear that it doesn't mean that you're never going to be thrown off the horse. Like we all get threatened, we all go into these survival patterns, but it means you know how to get back on the horse. You know how to step back into that authentic, sustainably adaptive version of yourself. I don't think sustainability means that it's always consistent, but it means that you can get back to that level that you're aiming for. So it's knowing who you are as a leader when the external conditions keep shifting. That's stabilizing the identity. And also building a durable decision-making process, one that doesn't depend on certainty, because certainty is not coming. Hate to break it to anyone, but like it's not. It's just not. We're in an era of constant change that is fueled by AI. But that's my true belief, is that that's where we are, and that's where we're going to stay, if you will. And the ability to hold ambiguity, like I said before, not defaulting to paralysis or overcorrection, but understanding that ambiguity can be held in neutrality in itself, and even in a positive way, especially when you are acknowledging that in yourself and the people that you're leading, because it exists, and to ignore it is foolish.
Yeah. I mean, certainly the pace of change and scope of change has dramatically changed since that November 22nd date, not just with the birth of your daughter, but also with the birth of generative AI, maybe is the way to say it. But I mean, that is definitely, I'm sure people feel much less secure, and there's a lot more, kind of swirling around them as these initiatives have rolled out and not rolled out and failed and be pulled back and gone back in. And so it's a complex environment.
Yeah, I would say complexity is a word that comes up possibly on a daily basis. Complexity and uncertainty.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, so, you mentioned that you work primarily in healthcare, and certainly healthcare does have some unique dynamics around trust, and I mean, trust is certainly a issue in any place where we're talking about agentic AI, but particularly patient relationships and, this sort of deeply human nature of healthcare. I mean, what have you seen in healthcare that could perhaps be applied in a broader business context that we should pay attention to, when you think about AI and the human side of adoption?
Yeah. So other than the fact that my whole career before this was in the space of healthcare is also the most human dependent industry on earth, in my opinion, at least. Yeah. And if it's failing the human layer of adoption, the AI adoption in particular, and it is, then every other industry should be paying attention, because what plays out in healthcare plays out everywhere, just with higher stakes. The specific thing I want to name is that, the specific thing I want to name is what I call regulated empathy. This is something that's really come from the healthcare space, but of course can translate anywhere. Healthcare leaders have been trained for decades to suppress emotional responses in order to appear professional and decisive. And of course, not just leaders, doctors as well, but we're going to focus on leaders today. Like, you don't show uncertainty when you're calling shots in the OR. You don't let patients or physicians see your doubt. And that suppression becomes the default operating mode. What AI is doing is accelerating that pressure enormously. The margin for error goes down, and it's already, not a great margin for
Right.
healthcare.
Well, it certainly has very high impact on anything on
Yeah.
any decision, right?
So I didn't mention this, but my husband is a physician, and
Ah,
he likes to remind me that, and I forgive me, I don't remember the exact stat, but he compares it to baseball, where they're expected to bat an average of like, I don't know, 30% or something like that, or even lower.
mm,
And he's like, and doctors are expected to bat 100%.
uh-huh.
And they're
No,
both
it's fair,
expertly,
and they're both yeah, that's
yeah. Yeah. I get it. We don't want to have errors in healthcare, but at the end of the day, it is run by humans. So when you have AI involved, the expectations go up, the margin for error goes down, the speed of decision making also goes up, and the expectation of certainty goes up with it. So this is when I'm seeing leaders double down on regulation. Then they suppress more, and in suppressing more, they lose access to the judgment, the intuition, interpersonal attunement, like everything that we're talking about. And again, this shows up everywhere. Just because we're talking about the batted average of healthcare in particular, expectations are rising in every industry. And so if we're dealing with an identity threat, plus the extra pressure of how we're supposed to perform when we may not even know who we are in that performance, you're not going to get the best outcomes.
mm,
If it's all right, I'd actually like to share an example of this
sure.
in one of my clients I'm incredibly proud of. He came into a new role as Chief Patient Safety and Quality Officer. It's a long title, which basically means that he's responsible for the emergency department in addition to the rest of the hospital, but that acutely. And he came to me in one of the most destabilizing periods of his career that collided with a hospital-wide AI project implementation. And within a year, thanks to doing this inner sustainable adaptability work,
Mm.
his department had practically eliminated ED, emergency department wait times, which was a huge problem, not the other ED.
I was going to say that would also be
Sorry.
pretty valuable, I think, to some
Yes.
people.
In
Anyway.
the medical world, there's lots of acronyms that I'm privy to that some others may not be. But he also saved, this was crazy, like 20 million from a single initiative, 50 million, I think, in cost savings overall that year related to quality and patient safety. The hospital ended up having its best financial and quality year on record, and then he was promoted to CMO within that first year. And I share that transformation story here because that work was not operational in the slightest. It was completely restoring his ability to lead from actual conviction instead of survival mode, which he was steeped in. So I have lots of examples of this, my clients and outside of my clients. But that was just a beautiful example of this work come to life.
Yeah, I mean, I work a lot with customer service, customer facing parts of organizations, and I mean, obviously the stakes are different, but from a company, a brand perspective, that is one of the biggest concerns when you go into the AI, projects, proof of concept, that sort of thing, that it could have dramatic repercussions on a brand at machine speed if things can happen in unpredictable ways or unpleasant ways for customers. So I can see how that crosses over from that perspective, from a medical example into a business example. Yeah. Makes sense. Well, so I like to from a practical perspective for leaders that are listening right now, and in a lot of cases, I have this conversation quite often that their teams are resisting the implementation, or they haven't been able to get out of proof of concept because of that resistance, or maybe even sabotaging it. Although I haven't had that conversation quite as much because it is fairly subtle, I guess. But what's the first thing they should do? And then, not the technology fix, but like the human one. Where do we start?
Yeah. May I say three things? And they're in order.
Mhm.
So you could say it's one bubble of human things that can be done. The first thing truly the first thing is to name the instability out loud. And not even necessarily as a problem to solve, but first as a reality to acknowledge. Most leaders are trying to protect certainty right now. And I completely understand why. Again, as a human, they think that's what their teams need. But what they actually need is permission to be honest about what this feels like. I don't know if you're aware of this, especially medicine, a de-escalation tactic is naming the emotion that's in the room. It's even better if you get them to name the emotion. And this is a version of doing that. So one direct conversation, like you could just say, this is a genuinely uncertain moment, and I know it's hard. And that changes the room more than any strategic roadmap does.
Interesting.
And the second is to audit your own autopilot, of course. So in order to model what you want for your organization, for your teams, you have to do it yourself. Hate to break it to you. So do an audit of yourself. Like, where are you deferring decisions you would normally make confidently? Where are you going rigid when you would normally stay flexible? And these are questions that, I mean, there's lots of other ways, and I can go into them another time, but like, where is your own survival mode taking over? You cannot lead someone else through an identity threat if you have not acknowledged the identity threat in yourself. I cannot stress that enough.
Yeah. I mean, that really does make sense. It resonates that I need to name the problem and then I need to own the problem, right? That makes sense.
And just this like is the human, this leads into a little bit more of the tangible aspect, but I'd say the third is change the metric. So stop measuring adoption speed, start measuring adaptive capacity to take on whatever it is that you are looking to implement. And ask yourself, are my people becoming more capable of navigating uncertainty, or are they just becoming more compliant? Because that produces very different cultures, and only one of them is durable.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. You know, during the period when we were really focused on generative AI instead of agentic, that one of the things that I saw, and this ties directly into what you were saying there, is that a lot of executives that rolled out generative AI types initiatives set themselves up to fail because they put extreme metrics in place on employees that hadn't gone through any sort of program to help them understand what they were supposed to do or why. So all of a sudden your quotas are 4x what they used to be, or your productivity measures have gone up dramatically and you don't understand how. And that was one of the biggest failure points I saw early on in the implementations from businesses, was misset that expectation of those metrics to the point that it was sort of a throw your hands up, like, well, I can't possibly do that. I don't even understand what this is, right?
100%.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, interesting, very interesting conversation. I think that we spend a lot of time talking about the technology, and often we don't spend nearly enough time talking about the people, because that is, one of the biggest issues. But so very interesting conversation. But before I let you go, one of the things I like to do at the end of every episode is get a recommendation. Somebody that you think the audience should check out, person, a thought leader, or an author, or a speaker, could be a regulation, I guess. I mean, anything that you think would be relevant that would help, the audience.
I think my recommendation is specifically related to what you were just saying about like focusing on the technology and not the humans. So just to put it plainly, I think most people think emotions, human needs are soft. And
we call them soft skills forever. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I could go on, and maybe it's been transparent here, but how they are not. And they are absolutely necessary more than ever in the age of AI. And so my recommendation, truly, I want to push forward as I think the leader in soft skills work that is fundamentally game changing. And that is Brene Brown. And she might sound like an obvious choice, but I really want to talk about her work on shame and vulnerability, which she is known for. And this is why it's not obvious for me. So everything I do with leaders ultimately comes back to one question. Can you be honest with yourself? And that is actually a lot harder than most people perceive it to be, or at the very least, a lot less frequent. People might even think it's easy, but how often do you really do that? How reliable are you to do that? And not vulnerable in a performative way, but like really vulnerable with yourself, like admitting things that are hard to admit, exploring things that are hard to explore. And can you see your own patterns clearly enough to interrupt them? So Brene's research on shame is the foundation underneath all of it. Shame is what makes leaders hide their instability instead of naming it. Shame is what keeps them on autopilot. And it's because they're not stopping to look at the pattern as it means confronting what they're afraid to see. A really quick note, because I think this is one of the most important distinctions I ever learned from Brene Brown, and everyone should read Atlas of the Heart. It talks about the 87 emotions and the definitions and differences between them. It's incredible. It should be required reading for every human. And that is a distinction between shame and, oh my God, I want to say disappointment. It's not disappointment. Oh my God. Shame. Sorry. The difference between shame and guilt. Guilt is about something we have done. We are guilty about something that we have done. Shame is about who we are. Shame about who we are as a person. And it's related here because we're talking about identity. So understanding your own relationship to shame and vulnerability is not soft work at all. It is the precondition for everything else. And you cannot build durable agency from a place of self-deception. That honesty has to come first.
Very interesting. Yeah, maybe I have something to add to my reading list too. That's good. Well, Eva, thanks so much. A really interesting conversation, and I really appreciate you joining today.
Thank you so much. This has really been an honor, and it's, I think, one of the most important messages I can put out into the world. So thank you for giving me that opportunity.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you. And that's the show for this week. Thank you all for joining us. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to the show. If you enjoy the show, please leave us a review to help others find us. For more research on AI and other software, check out arianresearch.com. If you're an expert in AI, generative AI, or business automation, either as a provider or an end user, email your information to disambiguation@arianresearch.com. Don't forget to join us next week. Disambiguation is an Arian Research production. I'm Michael Fauscette, and this is the Disambiguation Podcast.